Oh, I mean, I guess we could talk about it, right? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, as the title, thumbnail, and everything you've clicked on suggests. But before we get into this, we have a little bit of housekeeping. This part of the channel is going to be known as the treehouse. It's a little part of the channel I've carved out just for myself. Yes, pun very intended. Over here you can expect book reviews, book rants, anything book related from yours truly, all by myself. So sorry about your luck. No Zoe, no beautiful face to look at. I know, get used to it. If you don't want to watch my side of the reviews and any of the books that I'm interested in, Zoe will have her own part of the channel, her own playlist, which is TBD on what she's going to name it. I'm just as eager as you guys are to find out what she names it, so I guess we'll just have to tune in and see what she calls it. One last thing before we get into the video, I have to go over our scoring system. And if you've seen our Fall Guy review, then you probably know what that is. Here on the channel, we use a revolutionary, uncomparable scoring system. Beans. 5 beans, in fact. And if you're thinking, that sounds just like the 5-star system, then you'd be right, because it's literally no different. We just use beans. Everything you know and expect, just with a little bit of our own branding on it. And to be honest, it's cute, so get over it. Now, without further ado, let's get into the book that has more tomorrows on it than I've seen since yesterday. As we get started with this review, I think it's important to go over what this book is and what this book isn't. What this book is a literary fiction book about 2 characters named Sam and Sadie through a mutual admiration of video games and just a series of really unfortunate things happening to them throughout their lives. The 2 quickly become best friends, as children do. This book is essentially about their friendship and their roller coaster of lives within the world of game development. This book is about 5 main themes. From what I can tell, the themes are life, struggle, friendship, trauma, and the passage of time. If those were too fast for you, I'm sure I'll have a graphic on the screen. The author goes into each of these in some form of magnitude, some more than others. I would say that the passage of time, friendship, and struggle are the ones that she hits on the most. Life is just what the book's about. I mean, that borders on a category for this book. What this book isn't is this book is not a romance book. It has romance elements in it, but it is not strictly a romance book. Now, what I'm about to say might be considered as a spoiler for some, so if you don't want to hear this or anything related to a spoiler for this book that's been out for over 2 years, I will go ahead and put a time code right here, and you can go ahead and skip forward to that time where I will not say anything related to anything that could be construed as a spoiler. The 2 main characters in this book do not, will not, and have never gotten together in any romantic fashion. If you're a person who wants to read a book about their 2 main characters falling in love, this is not the book for you. They have a friendship love that keeps them together, and some might say is stronger than a romantic love in some aspects. In this book, I wouldn't say that, but that's kind of the aim I think the author had for this. This book is not a first-person story. You do not get the internal monologues of the characters. You do not get to hear their inner workings and their feelings throughout a scene. For me, this leads to a little bit of frustration within the characters, but I'll dive into that deeper in the review. And finally, what this book is not, and this is kind of funny because I was recommended this book through a YouTube video, and for some reason, I had the misconception that this was a time travel book. And with the title of Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, I kind of thought this would be kind of like the movie Live, Die, Repeat, or maybe a Groundhog Day. But it's not. Shocker. Feels like it's needless to say, but I was a person who thought it was going to be a time travel book, so I'm going to include it in this review. This is not a time travel book. There is no time travel elements. The closest you will get is a flashback sequence that happens. Don't be like me. Don't go into this thing it's a time travel book and be very disappointed. And lastly, before I get into my personal thoughts on the book, I'm going to include a section of things you should probably know before you read. I'm the type of person who is notorious for wanting to buy hardbacks of every copy of the book I've owned. For me, before I make that purchase and make that investment, that $30 price tag, I want to know if there's going to be a deal breaker in the book that I'm just not going to be able to get past, and I'm going to ultimately put the book down before I spend $30. First thing you should know before you go into this book is that you should not be looking for a heavy romance. There are some spice scenes. There is romance in this book, not something that's going to be in your face. Matter of fact, it is so not in your face it comes out of left field sometimes, but again, I'll get into that later. Secondly, there is some political commentary in this book. I think we're all used to some form of politics being in entertainment, whether it be in books, video games, movies, TV shows. It's just kind of the norm nowadays. I'm someone who's kind of sensitive to it because I don't like my escapism to be too much like the real world. Like, if I'm going to watch a show like House of Cards, obviously I'm in it for politics. But if I pick up a book about video games, I'm not necessarily wanting to read about real life politics and discourse. That being said, this book does have political commentary, but it is not in your face, it is not abrasive, and she does it in a way that fits the characters, and it does not, for the most part, break up the story. Now for the fun part. Now for my thoughts on the book. A 21-year-old in college who has read probably less books than you have in your entire life. So here's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Now, with respect to the characters, I thought most of them were likable and thoroughly enjoyable throughout this book. Especially Sam. Sam was a standout for me, as he probably should, being one of the main characters. He was very funny, he was very quirky, his little personality tics reminded me a lot of Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. I just always loved that type of social pariah character who's like just a little bit out of touch to make him funny in certain situations. He does go through a lot of growth in the book, so it's fun to watch him in his, what I'm going to call, Sheldon phase, and then into more of a well-adjusted public speaking, public facing role that he has later in the book. And no surprise to anybody who's read this book before, I thought Marks was a standout character. He carried a lot of the heavy moments in the book for me. He provided a lot of levity. He gave you just a bit of a dose of reality and normalcy in a book based about fictional worlds. However, I didn't like Sadie, and this was a pretty big sticking point for me throughout the book. I just didn't feel connected to her. I thought she was annoying towards the end. I couldn't really empathize with her decisions. For example, with what I mean with Sadie, and this is spoiler free, don't worry about spoilers. There's an event in this book where she finds something, and without any evidence to the affirmative, without talking to anybody about it, without getting anybody's opinion on it, she decides she's going to clean cut, remove this person from her life, not interact with them, not work with them, not help them in any way that will be beneficial with their company. My issue with this is she's old enough in this story. I believe she's in her middle to late 20s, maybe even early 30s. To do this at that age is just overall immature. And the things that she does after, especially in the end of the book, I just felt to be very frustrating. And after a certain point, I just couldn't empathize with the character, and I stopped wanting to. This made the ending of the book, I would say the last 100, maybe 70 pages or so, very frustrating for me and very hard to get through. But overall, the characters in this book, I almost said movie, overall the characters in this book were very enjoyable, and I thought really carried the story forward. Speaking of the story, I found it to be completely original. I loved it. It was very fresh. There's not a lot of books or just entertainment out there about people creating games and game design and game development. And lastly, before I give my final rating on this book, I just wanted to point out one small thing that might bother you. It might not. I mean, you might enjoy it. You might find it funny. Some characters have spy scenes in this book that you just don't expect them to have. I don't know. I found it humorous while I was reading. I also found it kind of confusing. But, I mean, if you like that kind of thing, it's in the book. And if you don't like the kind of thing, then good news for you is they're pretty brief and somewhat comical. Now for the moment everybody's been waiting for. What rating do I give Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? For me, I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was original. I thought most of the characters were very funny and very engaging. And for that, 4 out of 5 beans. I would definitely recommend this book to somebody. If anybody in your life is somewhat nerdy or just likes video games in general, I would definitely recommend this to them. The references aren't too steep, they're not too in detail, so I think people who just have a cursory knowledge of video games would definitely enjoy this book, and overall it's just a fun story to go through. So that's going to do it for this review. If you guys enjoyed this video, I'm going to be putting out a very positive review of The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. I just finished this book a couple days ago. It's about 300 pages, really quick read, very fun, very entertaining, and oddly nostalgic. So if you want to see that review, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.